这家是11还不知道。这主要。
Thank you, Maria.
Whoa, Clive, did you draw something? That looks awesome.
This is Grace Jin Drexel, the daughter of Pastor Ezra Jin, and her husband Bill, in their home in Washington, D.C. They met in 2018 in China, when Bill, an American student surreptitiously studying state surveillance of religious minorities, visited Zion Church in Beijing, then one of the two highest profile underground churches in the country.
You want to tell it?
No, you're a much better person to tell the story.
Grace was there. I did notice her, actually, during the service, a few rows behind me, and I did swoon. I definitely didn't know she was the pastor's daughter. I didn't know the pastor had a daughter. But she introduced herself to me afterwards.
He stood out.
And because I was studying this stuff, I understood from our conversation that she was a target of the government.
Throughout Chinese history, there have been waves of persecution of religious groups. During the Cultural Revolution beginning in the 1960s, the Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong, sought to wipe out all religious activity. Those who expressed any faith or belief in a power higher than Mao's were intimidated, jailed, even tortured by a party paranoid of its own demise.
Every dictatorial regime fears true conscience liberty, true religious freedom, because people, again, with strong convictions, very often faith-based convictions, will always have a higher authority to which they answer than the state.
The Cultural Revolution saw thousands of religious sites destroyed, and it is estimated more than 1 million people were killed, either by their fellow countrymen or by the government seeking to maintain order.
It left Chinese society in a very strange place, because to induce that level of cultural destruction so fast, it leaves a vacuum. When you've had generations following this religious tradition or these familial rites or this set of social structures, have it all torn down deliberately in a concentrated span of time and replaced with a communist ideology that turned out to be totally bankrupt. And not too long thereafter.
After Mao Zedong's death in 1976, the party went through a phase of opening up to the world, but it only lasted so long. On June 4th, 1989, Chinese tanks rolled into Tiananmen Square in Beijing, where thousands of students had been camping out for weeks, demonstrating for democracy.
A city under siege by China's own Liberation Army. Gunfire is still being heard in the streets of Beijing.
Between 2,000 and 10,000 people were killed as China turned toward totalitarianism.
Many of the wounded were bystanders, surprised when the soldiers opened fire indiscriminately.
Ezra Jin was a college student in Beijing at the time. And in the aftermath of the massacre, he says he felt a profound emptiness.
那时候我才20周岁，等于我原有的对世界的认识都经历了这种不可思议的摧毁。
In his search for meaning, Ezra Jin found Christianity and a calling to be a pastor. He spent over a decade working for the Communist Party-controlled churches, known as the Three Self-Patriotic Movement churches. Eventually, he began to feel the government should not be setting the agenda and teachings of a church.
That is not the church that glorifies God, because it is not the church that puts God ultimately as the leader. You are always contesting with what does the government, what does the party is telling you. The state church, in its very system, is saying that the party has to come before God.
In 2007, Ezra Jin founded his own church, Zion Church, dedicated only to God. It started underground, meeting in people's homes, until they eventually got their own worship space in Beijing, which could fit nearly 500 people. Pastor Jin built this community even though he knew the government might come after him one day.
The watershed was 2018, because in the beginning of that year, a new version of the regulations on religious affairs took effect. As a result, all religious activities outside the government-sanctioned churches became officially illegal.
In 2018, the government banned the Bible from being sold on the internet. They brought some Christians in for interrogation. It became so common, Christians began referring to it as being, quote, taken out for tea. The government kicked their kids out of schools. They froze their bank accounts, intimidating them to renounce their faith. The government shut down Zion's worship space after Pastor Jin refused to let them place facial recognition cameras inside. During this crackdown, Pastor Jin and his entire family, including Grace, lived under an exit ban. The government officially prevented them from leaving the country, citing vague national security concerns. So when Bill and Grace fell in love, they thought it would be impossible to be together. Grace still doesn't know why she was allowed to leave in January 2020 to move to the United States, just before COVID shut down the world. All she knows is her father was never allowed to leave himself, which means he couldn't attend her wedding or even meet her 2 children. What happened next was even more disturbing.
So in 2021, he was back in Beijing after traveling, and the government officials asked him out to dinner. And so he went to dinner, but he actually told some of the students beforehand, like, if I don't check back in an hour, then come and get me. We don't know what's going to happen. And very luckily he did that, because at this dinner, we later found out that the government officials drugged him. And when the seminarians, when his students came to look for him, he was like slurring his words. He was like very, very just distraught.
Visibly disoriented.
Visibly disoriented. And we have no idea what they were planning to do with him at all in that state. So, especially as family members who are in another country who can't see him, it really, really scared all of us of what could have been.
Then, on October 10th, 2025, Pastor Jin was arrested during the largest crackdown against Christians in China since the Cultural Revolution. Raids in 11 cities nationwide detained nearly 36 Christian leaders. 18 of them, including Pastor Jin, remain in prison under charges like subverting the state or illegally disseminating information online.
The fact that they went after this church in a nationwide, coordinated set of raids, taking people at night, cutting their power, coming for elderly pastors, and tearing young parents from their families. It's really just such a strong exhibition of the state cannot tolerate independent belief.
On October 10th in the morning, I woke up to a text by my dad to talk about an arrest of another pastor, Pastor Wang Lin. Shortly after I read the letter, I received a call from my mom saying that, in fact, she has not been able to get in contact with my dad nor anyone around him for many hours already. Zion Church has a pastor in the U.S., and he led a Zoom call with all the church leaders in China, and in real time we heard people say, "I have the police right outside my door right now."
And then they just quit from Zoom, and then that individual also disappeared.
When I heard all this information, that was when I just kind of freaked out and started texting everyone that I knew on my phone. And just just like telling them of the situation and saying that, like, what should I be doing? Like, what can I do to help my dad? Like this, my dad is potentially going to be in jail.
Pastor Jin has been unable to communicate directly with his family, but they fear he will be tortured or spend the rest of his life in prison. They say he sleeps on a concrete bench in a cold room without a blanket, and that Chinese officials have denied him his diabetes medicine and access to a Bible.
On October 10th, my father, Pastor Ezra Jin, was arrested by the Chinese authorities along with 27 other pastors and church leaders of Zion Church.
加油.
Oh my goodness, I'm so nervous. My gosh, yet even repression cannot extinguish faith.
Grace now spends her time traveling the world advocating for politicians to pressure China about her father's detention.
Grace.
It's definitely a process that I'm still working through right now.
Joining us on stage, Grace Jean Drexel.
I did not want this as my life.
As they work to bring awareness to Pastor Jin's case, Bill and Grace have found themselves targets of the Chinese government, even on American soil.
You can't really see, but Clive's little play kitchen has a camera looking out onto the street, and we've got them on all four corners of the house. I got a baseball bat. It's just over here. Hopefully it doesn't come into use. You can see Clive got his play baseball bat as a sidekick because he was there when I bought it and said, well, I want one, and I didn't want him playing with a metal one. We're on alert that at any time the Chinese are infamous for trying to intimidate people abroad, and it's not uncommon.
I spoke about this with Senator Ted Cruz. He's been vocal about this in Congress, even passing a resolution advocating for Pastor Jin's release.
I know that you're a practicing Christian. Yeah. Your father is a pastor. Mm-hmm. How does it make you feel to know that there is somebody like Pastor Ezra Jin and other Christians who are currently sitting in prisons for practicing their faith?
Well, the Chinese Communist Party hates Christians. The Communist Party hates its citizens having any loyalty to anything other than the state. And for a long time, the Chinese Communist Party has been persecuting Christians in China. These pastors know they're risking persecution, and nonetheless, they have the courage of their faith. The reporting we're getting back is that he's kept in terrible conditions, that it is freezing cold, that there's snow and rain in his prison cell. He doesn't have a blanket. And that's consistent. That is how China treats its prisoners. They are targeting specifically Christians for persecution.
Thinking on American soil, you have somebody like Grace who's now stepped into this role to advocate for her father. And since then, she told us she has been followed and watched here in Washington, D.C. Her mother has had her tires slashed. There's been other intimidation efforts to try to silence her. Can the United States government protect American citizens like Grace?
Look, China has a long pattern of abusing, in particular, the rights of Chinese Americans in the United States. You look at the pattern of the Chinese government employing spies and employing Chinese soldiers on U.S. soil to harass predominantly Chinese Americans who are saying and doing things that they don't agree with. That is unacceptable, and I think the Department of Justice, I think the FBI, I think we need to be fighting back absolutely to protect the rights of every Americans and go after Chinese malign activity on U.S. soil.
Pastor Jin's family continues to keep the pressure up in the hopes that a negotiation will be reached that frees him.
So Secretary Rubio has weighed in.
The reality is China imprisons a lot of people for unconscionable reasons. And so we are fully aware that the likelihood of getting Grace's dad out or any of those with him is extremely low. It would be a miracle. We believe in a God of miracles, so we are hoping for that actively. And we're pushing the U.S. government and any government we can to help make that happen.
And it's not just about my dad's story, it's about the story of so many of these Christians in all these years that's been suffering for their faith. I'm asking for a miracle for my dad to be out of prison.